what the heck is a fair chance law? Where does it currently apply? What's the trend here?
Yeah. So, again, when we fair chance laws are so that we give a fair chance to somebody with a record, somebody who has a felony conviction, somebody who has been in prison, etc. And New York City was one of the first places that started it. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story because I want employers to understand this. And I give this story when I do interviewing training, because we should be interviewing individuals who are hiring people who are good at the job, have the skills for the job. So I had an employer who had a stellar head of sales. Guy was great, literally number 2 at the company, made the company really successful. Unfortunately, driving down the road one day, probably speeding because it was 25-mile-an-hour zone, not, intoxicated, not on his phone, but a child ran between 2 cars. And tragedy occurred, and the child was killed. And this individual went to jail for manslaughter. And when he came out, he had a hard time finding another job, because that shows up if you do a background check. And that is what, and for many individuals, right, we cannot discriminate against an individual solely because they have a criminal history. Now, there are federal employers that cannot hire somebody with a felony conviction. So, that is separate from what we're talking about here. But the fair chance laws are set up so that we give individuals who have paid their debt to society, if we will, a fair chance at hiring. Texas is new in 2022, and there are roughly 37 states and 150 cities who have adopted fair chance hiring laws. So what I will say to employers is that you need to look at the conviction, right? So if the conviction is for larceny and you're hiring them for your CFO position, then you most certainly can use that as a reason not to hire them. It is job related. But if we take the example that I gave, and it's manslaughter for the accident that this individual happened, then you really wouldn't be able to use that conviction against somebody who was head of sales, let's say, for the positions that he was looking for. Now, I had an employer call me once and say, well, Mayor, I'm looking to hire somebody, and they have a conviction for manslaughter for beating a guy to death in a bar fight. And he's in, very active, warehouse with lots of individuals. There's a lot of action. There's, we've had fist fights before. The guys get mad at each other, right? And so that would need further discussion. So, I'm making it sound black and white. It is not. This is something that
I was gonna ask you something. I feel like this is maybe a conversation with our friend Brian Schenker over at Jackson Lewis. And this is one of the maddening things for me as an entrepreneur, and I think for other entrepreneurs. In so many ways, HR compliance is black and white. 1099, exempt, non-exempt. There are black and white rules that govern this stuff. Here's a black and white law, fair chance laws. They're maybe nuanced by state, but it's written down as a law. But there's still gray area. There's still area, right?
Course.
Like if somebody in your example, when you say a felon, you and I did a webinar recently on unconscious bias. Everybody got a picture in their head of what a felon looks like, right? And it might be some shady character in a trench coat in the dark alley,
Right.
They didn't picture the person who looks just like them in the mirror, who was charged for manslaughter for that accident, right? So,
Right.
but and so that's like, ooh, yeah, that shouldn't count. Fair chance law is great for that person. But what about the person in the bar fight? Is it fair to impugn their character based on that, and so that disqualifies them from any job? These things get gray, and it's just still, I'm always going to come back. The more you can tie things back to a job description and your policies in an employee handbook, and those job descriptions are tied to competencies that are written down, what are the competencies required to perform the job, that sets you up for success in all these other nuanced decisions, right? Around pay ranges based on competencies in job descriptions, based on, okay, they did commit this crime. Is there a more obvious correlation because I have the job description written down, or because I have this written in my handbook? You still have nuance, you still have gray area, but all these HR best practices help to make things more black and white, and make your decisions more defensible. I don't think I'm overstating that. Do you?
No, and I think, what comes up most often is DWI. I think it's DWI is the felony and DUI is not. So I think that comes up more. There's also clean slate laws, which allows certain criminal histories to be expunged after a certain amount of time. So Arizona passed that, and it's expanding to 19 more states. So, I think what I would say to employers about this, just to wrap this with a bow, to use your wording, Mike, is that I think, like you said, just reiterate to your managers that they should be looking at experience, and if there is criminal history, is it related to the job that they'll be doing?
Yeah. And something I say over and over, the war for talent has hit Main Street. I drive down my local neighborhood, and there's help wanted signs everywhere because businesses can't get enough people to even run their business at full capacity. This is not going away. This is not simply the result of a pandemic or who has control of Congress or White House. These are mega trends that have been underway based on birth rates and workforce engagement rates for decades, right? This is not going away anytime soon. If you want to hire talented people and retain them, you have to expand your horizons for where you look for talent. And so if you have some personal biases that you think, well, I don't like that law because, we're a high moral virtue company, and I care about if they have a criminal record. Well, maybe giving someone a second chance is great, and maybe the law that prevents you from seeing that in the first place is great because it just expanded your talent pool.